Magic occurred. Okay. So my name is Mary Cheng, and I'm in the area of Christian spirituality. And a little bit about myself. This is my second career. I've worked in the area of university administration and technology and disability at the intersection of those things for a while. So I came back here to GTU to work on, to actually get more in touch with my own spirituality, and to also prepare for another career in terms of looking at how can I help address some of the critical issues of this world, that this world is facing, and feeling that I need to upgrade myself. So lo and behold, I enrolled in Christian spirituality because it had a variety of courses that I needed to take, and I love Bible, I love history, I love all of these things. And so, but it was not until I took a course with Bob Russell in Theology and Science that I came to my senses. That what I really do need is to understand more about this interface between faith and science. So in looking at my first paper that I did for Bob's class was actually looking at hymns in the Methodist tradition, and looking at it through the empathy construct. And so from there, then I went and did more work in cognitive linguistics, cognitive science, and neuroscience. I'm not a musician, but singing, I do sing, and I do know the transformative impact of song, communal song. So in Christian spirituality, our focus is a little bit different. We're not working with intellectual history or ideas per se in that sense. We're really looking at lived experience. And what do people actually experience? And what are those perhaps practices that engage people in transformation? And so my own interest is in spiritual transformation and formation. And so this is, okay, so early Methodist communal song. David Hampton is a social historian at Harvard and a Methodist scholar. And he said that hymns and hymn singing were the most distinctive, characteristic, and ubiquitous feature of the Methodist message. Indeed, the entire Methodist revival. So a little background. The Methodist movement in the British Isles was part of a broader evangelical movement which sought to renew the Church of England in the 18th century. Now, during the 18th century is where there's a whole host of, that's when the English Enlightenment was occurring. And so John and Charles Wesley, they were Anglican clergy. What they sought to do was to emphasize the need for heartfelt religion, issuing forth an ethical Christian living, responding to the currents of deism and rationalism, and the challenges that it posed for faith. So what they sought to do was to invigorate the church, and they were influenced by several strands of the Christian tradition, namely the pietistic strand from Europe, as well as their Anglican holy living tradition. So what they advanced was the notion of experiential religion, or religion of the heart. And this aims at inward or personal experience of faith. Conversion as the restoring of relationship with God, and sanctification, the continuous transformation of character to embody love of God and love of neighbor, were the goals of early Methodism. And within this context of heart religion, hymns were an important channel mediating God's grace, grace that can be perceptibly felt and necessary in order for change to occur. So in looking at, reading the testimonies, the conversion narratives, the letters and journals of these 18th century Methodists, we came across many references to the impact of hymns. Okay, so Hester Ann Rogers, she talked about opening a hymn, singing it with her class, and having her heart filled with divine presence and love. Mary Ramsey, she talked about how she was converted when 2 lines of Charles Wesley's hymns were sung. Or Sarah Colston, how the singing of hymn struck her with the power and love of Christ. Again, Sarah Ryan, she went to the communion rail, reminded about Charles Wesley's hymn, and immediately was filled with life, joy, and love, and said with confidence to God, "Thou art my resurrection and life." So, the questions that I have is, why was hymn singing so powerfully transformative in 18th century Methodism? And what can current research on mind-brain processes and functioning contribute to this question? So my thesis is that it's the layering of lyrics, music, and the group singing dynamics that activates the neurobiological and psychophysical processes of emotion and memory that undergird the affective experience of divine love and presence. And that this is crucial for catalyzing and sustaining spiritual transformation according to the Wesleyan paradigm. So the genre of hymns is lyrical poetic text, is not, second order theology, but theology nonetheless, written from the author's perspective and has a rhetorical function, function to persuade, to certain commitments, and to a certain course of action. So my scope is 18th century British Methodism, and I will be analyzing actually hymn lyrics, tunes, and 2 singing contexts, and bringing together the experiences of the people in those contexts. My methods, I'm applying a hermeneutical approach to the interpretation of texts, and I'm using methods from theology and science, theories from psychology, research from neuroscience, hymnology, and historical musicology. My sources include first-person narratives, as well as third-person contemporaneous reports, psychology, neuroscience, neuropsychology of music, and the 18th century understanding of music. So communal song analysis. So I'm looking at this, the layering kind of effect. So with looking at the cognitive affective content with the poetic structure and language, the stylistics, and really looking at that the theology that they were singing actually matches what was being preached. And so there is a redundancy there. Okay. Then the role of music, looking at the multimodal impact of music, which is what neuroscience of music is showing us, how music impacts the different areas of the brain that affects our experience of music. And particularly looking at music and emotions. And then when I go to the collective experience in context, I'm looking at the levels of psychophysical, the social, and the spiritual. So my claim number one is that lyrics convey theological commitments of the movement in an affective manner, helping to form cognitive affective schemas that shape the hymn readers' and singers' perceptions of the world. So this has an influence upon their religious imagination, so to speak, and forming their religious imagination. And so I will be looking particularly at a central image of Christ on the cross, and then looking at this sink me to perfection sight and depth of humble love as a real, this comes up very often in the journals and the letters. And so I'm looking at both of these and saying, okay, what is this? What do people get when they sing these hymns? You know, what are the cognitive, conceptual structures, cognitive affective structures that are shaping them, or that they are embodying, actually. Claim number two is that music has psychophysical effects on mind and body that trigger the experience of emotions, and when paired with lyrics, highlights the saliency of the song, amplifying its effects, and leading to enhanced memory encoding and retrieval. And so this can be backed up with neurophysiological studies, and I'm using neurobiological processes on emotion and emotion elicitation in music. Claim three. Singing together allows for the possibility of re-instantiating the experience of the love of God and the unity of participants in the assembly, thereby reinforcing the truth of the Methodist vision of love of God and love of neighbor, and motivating actions that carry out this vision. So, so what I'm saying is that when people get together, not only are they being formed, but that they are really experiencing an emergent experience of reality that can be defined as the presence of God, or that they define as the presence of God. And I'll be using social psychological theory of empathy, as well as neuroscientific studies to point to that. And the empathy construct that I'm using is based on Jean de Saete's, where we're looking at empathy as emotional resonance, and empathy as emotion understanding, and empathy as empathic concern. And they build on each other. And so what I'm trying to argue is that in singing these hymns, they're actually becoming, not only is this happening, but it's helping them to understand, and it's also forming them to be, to develop empathic concern for their neighbor. My assumptions and methodological commitments. Oh, I didn't put that first.
Not even.
Because I'm a Christian spirituality person. So yes, mind-body relations, dual aspect monism, and human persons are psychosomatic unities. So I'm not going to argue that, I'm just assuming that. Another commitment is a non-reductive account. Neuroscience is based on reduction. methodological reduction at least, if not ontological, well, ontological reduction as well. But I'm committed to a non-reductive account, and that there is, that there's something more, that neuroscience cannot characterize that whole experience. And that the first and third person accounts are complementary ways of examining the phenomena, that qualia is true, and that is a valid way to examine things. And I'm basing it on Max Bellman from University of London and Brunner. So, in terms of my science and theology, since I'm Methodist, using the Wesleyan quadrilateral, and where there are many different geometric diagrams of this quadrilateral, ranging from a square to, Venn diagrams. But I like this the best because it doesn't prioritize anything, even though here you see scripture as the top. But you can roll this around, and in many ways, right? Each of these 4 legs. And so, so scripture, tradition, experience, reason are all sources for understanding spiritual phenomena. And so neuroscience being as extension of reason. And I'm using the theological, science and theological method, the resonance model. Since I'm doing music, I thought resonance would be, apt. It's an acoustical metaphor, where it's the amplification or enrichment of sound when two or more auditory signals vibrate together synchronously or harmonically. So, not that, each neuroscience and spirituality or theology has to agree or even integrate, but that each has a valid view of what truth is, or what the phenomenon is. And they, and the task is to find where are they, vibrating synchronously. Okay, so that's it. Questions?
5 minutes of questions.
Tell me what you think about the word affect, because you use the word affect quite a bit, and if my memory is accurate, it was a word widely used in the 18th century. Jonathan Edwards, Charles Wesley, and others, the affective dimensions.
Affections.
Affections.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a word in recent psychology, etc. Do you have a working definition of it, or for your project, or do you kind of let the various meanings sort of, what do you mean by affection?
Oh, well, affect that I use here is it's a very general term for everything that emotions, and I'm using emotion also, probably emotion and affect interchangeably.
Okay.
And that it encompasses more than what we normally think emotion is. Mm-hmm. And so I'm looking really at a theory, more using neuroscientist Jacob Pansep, his idea of affective neuroscience,
Mm-hmm.
Or the neuroscience of emotions, is really a subcortical activations, you can say, that motivates our actions, our very basic actions. And so I'm using it at a very basic level.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and also building up. And so I will have a chapter that talks about emotions and how that builds up from, you could say, the subcortical level to the
Is my heart subcortical?
Your heart is in your body. It's embodied. So yeah, so part of it is is defining what this emotion is. And so I'm starting at a very basic level at the affective neuroscience level and all the way up to aesthetic emotions. So, yeah, taking the whole range. First, primary, secondary, tertiary, you know, according to concepts, kind of way. Yes.
Okay. Mary, you said that people reported singing together to be an experience of God. It's a divine experience. And I'm wondering if it's a part of your work or if you have, and if it's not really a part of what you're specifically going to work on, if you have an inclination one way or the other, if you think that is a God-initiated experience, or is there something about the act of doing that as human beings that engages God in some way?
That's a good question. And I think, you know, Wesleyans have a good notion of prevenient grace. And so, so not that all singing, you know, will lead to this experience of God. But John Wesley actually has some directions for singing. And so I think within that context, you know, sing spiritually, sing together, sing in time, you know, that the possibilities of experiencing, you know, a visitation of God's Spirit, I think it's increased.
So it's also spiritual practice.
It is spiritual practice, yes, it is spiritual practice. So it's not unconditioned, right? That you do X and you get Y. Right? It's not that way. So
Very good. That makes it even more interesting, and I think that adds a lot to it.
Yeah, but then my friend Mario calls me Nexus.
So singing as a group, Margaritaville would not be a spiritual forming experience?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think when we're talking about forming in the Wesleyan tradition, you know, but I could say that perhaps in the current area, when people gather together to sing, they do experience something that's bigger than themselves. And if we cast a net broad enough in terms of what spirituality means, I think there could be something to be said about experience of something greater than oneself. Does that make sense?
Let's thank Mary.